Good afternoon. This is Jim Whitehead of All Power Group. And today we're wearing the hat of Phoenix Animal. You know, I have both the Phoenix Animal channel, and I also have a coffee channel called Power Coffee News. I love animals, so that fits for what I'm doing here. And I didn't drink coffee until later in life and love it and get so, how would you say, wrapped up that I started a coffee roasting business about 5 years ago. We're over here in Naples, so accordingly, unfortunately, I am not right now in the coffee business, but we're trying to work on that. I'm in my content creation building that we put in new when we moved here 2.5 years ago, but the property already had a smaller, it looks like a little barn actually, and that would be wonderful to turn into a coffee roasting opportunity within the building. So maybe, but regardless of that, let's talk about Barnaby. Yeah, Barnaby, you've seen in some of my stories, but here's what happens. Barnaby, and you'll see his owner, they go to see, and they live in Texas, and they go to see the master's daughter 2,000 miles away, and, well, you can probably guess, and I'm going to tell you as I get into it what happened and what Barnaby had to do to survive. Anyway, Barnaby was a scruffy terrier mix with one floppy ear and a tail that curled like a question mark. You know, and there he is with his owner. And, you know, those that love animals, you will always identify with how wonderful you feel when you're with your animal. And, of course, he's an older gentleman. His name is Samuel. And he loves Barnaby. You know, it's company, it's fun, walks, we can go on and on and on. Anyway, his entire world was the small, quiet house of his human. I like that when they say his human. I guess my Jamie, I'm her human. He is an elderly gentleman. Ooh, that's me too, named Samuel. I think I'm a gentleman, but I know I'm elderly anyway. Excuse if I throw some humor here and there. Their days were a comfortable rhythm of morning walks, afternoon naps, and sunbeams, and evenings, they would be sitting by the fire. What a life, really. And, you know, it's funny. Animals they're just wonderful. I can't make it any more obvious that I'm an animal lover. Whenever we watch any show, movie, and there's an animal, I go, oh. And with any animal story, if anything's going to happen to the animal, even though you know it's not real, I don't like it. So anyway. So he just loves being with Sam. Sam loves being with Barnaby. Their world shattered during a cross-country trip to visit Samuel's daughter. They were in Oregon. You know, I've always wanted to go to Oregon. A land of towering green trees and misty air, a stark contrast to their dusty home in central Texas. Okay, during a stop at a bustling roadside market, a logging truck backfired with a deafening bang. In a blind panic, Barnaby ripped and ran away. So unfortunately, Samuel's aging grasp and bolted into the dense, unfamiliar forest, and you saw him running away. Unfortunately, he didn't know what he was doing, but he was very afraid of that, blast, backfire from that logging truck. And, certainly Barnaby wouldn't automatically want to leave, but they're afraid for their life. For days, Samuel and his family searched, calling his name until their voices were raw, but Barnaby was gone, swallowed by the wilderness over 2,000 miles from the only home he'd ever known. Alone, the terrier's instincts, long dormant, flickered to life. We all have innate, I guess you might say, skills, memories, things that if we kind of forgot this or that, we might remember something from what we had done before. Anyway, he learned to hunt voles, finding water, as you see, in hidden streams, and to fear the shadows of larger predators. Yet, a deeper instinct pulled at him, and he has a sense of direction. And I have somewhat of a sense of direction, but we can use, as being relatively smart adults, we can use things around us to recognize what direction we're going or we need to go. And, you use the sun, use where the sun sets, in the west, comes up in the east. And you go on and on and on. Some of the things that you basically are able to help with what direction you need to go. So Barnaby, luckily, had some innate direction finding skills, or he probably never would have been going in the right direction. Anyway, in his heart, that smelled of Samuel's wool sweater and the dry Texas soil. So he knows where he needs to go back to, and he has a sense of direction. But I admit, it's real hard. He doesn't certainly carry a map or GPS. He's got to kind of figure out where's he going from and where he's going to. So anyway, he began to walk. He walked southeast, guided by a sense that felt as certain as the rising sun. His first year was a blur of survival. He trotted along the lonely shoulders of highways, a small, determined shadow against the roaring 18-wheelers. But luckily, a kind trucker seeing the purpose in his gait, shared a piece of a hamburger and gave him a 100-mile lift before turning north. Also, Barnaby found a family that was camping in the Nevada desert. They took him in for a week, calling him Scout, which probably is very apropos for his skills, and giving him a warm bed, but the pull of home was still too strong. He was there for a week, and as you can see, he's resting his muscles. I'm sure they gave him water, they gave him food, and they probably were saying, hey, maybe Scout, that they're calling him, will be our dog from now on. But that's not to be. And one morning, he slipped away before they woke. And I'm sure they were either disappointed that they were going to lose him or did lose him, but maybe recognizing that he had to find and get home. So they did a nice little step. Now, when you go from Oregon to Texas, you're going by the Rocky Mountains, and of course, here is Barnaby saying, I had not seen snow before or been in snow before, so I'm not sure if I'm really happy about this. Anyway, he crossed the formidable Rocky Mountains not in a comfortable car, but by scrambling through windswept passes, his paws raw and bleeding. He learned the harsh language of winter, burrowing into snowbanks for warmth and surviving on scraps left by skiers. His brown coat grew thick and matted, and he had a scar from a run-in, as you can see, with a raccoon. It marked a thin silver line above his eye. So in other words, he's really working hard. His body's getting a little, where you'd say he really should be home with Sam, but he's not. But he's determined. And I believe animals would be extremely determined to get back to their owners. And it's not that they would say, nobody else is as nice as my owner, but, there's a lot of good people that love animals. But he's like, no, I need to get back to Sam. Through Utah and Colorado, he became a ghost, a fleeting glimpse for drivers who would wonder, was that a dog? He navigated the sprawling suburbs of Denver, a terrifying maze of fences and barking rivals. He forded rivers, swam canals, and learned that he could follow train tracks. So he's smart enough, and I admit, train tracks don't always go in the right direction, but because he has that magnetic sense, he's saying, I'm going to walk on this train track And in my assumption or calculations, I'm heading in the right direction. So he does that, following there, and he followed the tracks for days. The rhythmic clatter, a strange sort of company. By the second year, Barnaby was no longer the soft-bellied pet he had been. He was lean, grizzled, and his eyes held a weary wisdom. The world had shown him its teeth, but it had also shown him kindness. And I'll tell you, I would take any dog in and have it where I would certainly want to find their owner. Anyway, the bowl of water left on a farmhouse porch, for example, the tossed aside crusts of bread, the child, as you can see, who had patted his head without fear. So, these little links, these little episodes help Barnaby probably feel that he's going to be okay. And we all want to feel, regardless of what circumstances we're in, that we're going to be okay. Finally, the air began to change. The scent of pine and damp earth gave way to the familiar smell of the bush and dry dust. He recognized the shape of the hills, the particular shade of the sunset. He was close. His weary trot became a limping, desperate jog. He found the town, then the street, and then the house. It was just as he had left it, only the paint was a little more peeled, the garden a little bit more overgrown. With the last of his strength, he hauled himself up the porch steps and collapsed against the front door, letting out a soft, raspy whine. Now, the door opened up, and as you can see, Barnaby knows he's home and he's found Samuel. The door creaked open. Samuel, now visibly older and moving with a cane, peered out. He saw a battered, unrecognizable stray, and his heart went out to it. Well, now, you look like you've had a rough go of it, little fella, he said softly. He was about to fetch a bowl of water when the dog lifted its head. For the first time in 2 years, Barnaby wagged his tail, the old question mark curl still there. He let out another whine, a specific hiccuping sound he always made when he wanted his dinner. So he's home. He recognizes Sam, and he remembers the little things he needed to do to live with Sam. Samuel's breath caught in his throat. He leaned down, his old hands trembling, as he brushed the matted fur from the dog's face, revealing the faint scar above his eye, remember from the raccoon. "Barnaby," he whispered, his voice cracking with disbelief and a flood of impossible hope. "My Barnaby." And here you go. And as you maybe know my channels a little bit, we like happy end. I like happy endings. I don't like to watch anything that doesn't have a happy ending, even if it's a show. I mean, it's not real. So if it's a happy ending, non-happy ending, I mean, it's not real. But and you won't see too many of my animal stories that basically have unhappy endings. I did have one. I did a horse about 2 weeks ago, and it was called a thinking horse. Is Morocco, and unfortunately, he was so smart. And back in his 1800s, he was so smart. He could count. He could pick out somebody in a group of people. If his master said, find someone in the crowd that has the longest beard, and the horse could. But unfortunately, when they went to their another location, people unfortunately thought that there was some sorcery and things that weren't right. And unfortunately, that was the end of Morocco, because people were like afraid, if I don't, destroy this animal, we're all going to have problems. But anyway, this is a happy ending. Sam is back with Barnaby, and life will continue in a much happier direction. And that's what all we look for, that tomorrow will be better than today. And I've always looked at it that way. Anyway, there is Barnaby before his great adventure. But he's happy to be home, and I am happy too. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for subscribing. And please stay well. And thanks again.